craving a peek at the forgotten 10-minute recipes only 50s housewives knew? These quick dishes turned simple pantry finds into dinners in a flash. How many of those clever secrets have quietly disappeared from our kitchens? Ham and pineapple toasties brought the bright sweetness of canned pineapple together with the smoky salt of sliced ham, creating a quick dish that looked elegant enough for unexpected guests while needing only minutes under the broiler. Housewives of the 1950s prized anything that could be made in 10 minutes, yet still feel special when set on the table for friends arriving after church or for a late afternoon bridge club snack. The pineapple rings came straight from the pantry, while the thin ham slices were usually left over from a weekend roast, making the recipe economical as well as fast. A simple white bread base toasted golden provided crunch and stability, while a light brushing of prepared mustard added a tang that balanced the fruit. Broiling for a few minutes melted the flavors together and filled the kitchen with a sweet, savory aroma that hinted of tropical getaways many homemakers only dreamed about. Children loved the contrast of warm fruit and salty meat, and adults enjoyed the effortless elegance that turned a weekday into a small celebration. Creamed peas on buttered saltines turned humble ingredients into a comforting snack that fit perfectly into the fast-paced rhythm of a mid-century kitchen. A can of peas, simmered briefly with evaporated milk and a spoon of flour thickened into a silky sauce, while salted crackers were quickly buttered and warmed in the oven. The result was a bite that married the soft sweetness of peas with the crisp snap of a cracker and the richness of melted butter, a texture that felt both homey and indulgent. Housewives favored this recipe when the pantry was sparse, but an afternoon visitor required something hot to serve alongside tea or coffee. Because everything came from the shelf, it required no trip to the market, a blessing for women juggling children, chores, and unexpected company. The mild flavor also made it popular with children who sometimes turned their share into playful towers before devouring them. Simple yet satisfying, it showcased how creative cooks could transform everyday staples into something memorable in less than 10 minutes. Jello whipped fruit parfait offered a colorful dessert that felt festive even on an ordinary evening, and it came together in record time thanks to the convenience of instant gelatin. A packet of flavored gelatin was dissolved in hot water and then chilled just until slightly thick before evaporated milk was whipped in to create a pale, frothy base. Housewives layered this creamy mixture with canned fruit cocktail or sliced bananas in clear glasses so every ribbon of color showed through. The result looked like something from a fancy restaurant, yet could be assembled between supper and the arrival of guests for cards or coffee. Children watched in delight as the layers jiggled and shimmered, and adults admired the light texture that melted on the tongue without being overly sweet. Because it needed only a brief chill, it was ideal for those moments when dessert was forgotten until the last minute. This quick treat captured the optimistic spirit of the 1950s, when convenience products promised elegance without effort, and every meal could end on a sparkling note. Velveeta tomato melt became a weeknight favorite because it turned ordinary garden tomatoes into a warm, satisfying dish in less than 10 minutes. Thick slices of ripe tomato were arranged on toast or even sturdy crackers, sprinkled with a touch of salt and pepper, and topped with generous slices of Velveeta cheese. A few minutes under a hot broiler transformed the cheese into a bubbling blanket that clung to the juicy fruit beneath. Housewives loved how the mild, creamy cheese mellowed the acidity of the tomato while the toast stayed crisp enough to pick up by hand. It required almost no preparation, no chopping beyond slicing the tomato, and the ingredients were inexpensive and easy to keep on hand year-round. Many children returning from school found this snack waiting as an after-school surprise, while adults often served it alongside a simple soup for a quick supper. The aroma of broiled cheese drifting through the kitchen was enough to gather the family around the table before the timer even rang. Sardine and celery canapes gave 1950s homemakers a way to serve a sophisticated bite without spending precious time in the kitchen. Canned sardines were mashed with finely chopped celery and a dash of lemon juice, creating a creamy yet crisp filling that could be spread on small squares of rye or wheat bread. The mixture provided a boost of protein and a briny flavor that felt upscale compared to typical sandwiches. Because the fish came ready to eat and the celery added instant freshness, the entire snack could be prepared during the time it took coffee to brew. Hostesses appreciated the elegant look of neatly arranged canapes on a platter, and guests were often surprised by how satisfying such a simple preparation could be. The contrast of the soft sardine spread and the crunch of fresh celery made every bite interesting. This quick recipe reflected the growing American taste for continental flavors while staying firmly rooted in the frugality and efficiency prized by housewives of the era. Butterscotch pudding. Icebox cups delighted families with a cool, creamy dessert that could be assembled in minutes and chilled until the end of dinner. Instant pudding mix, a relatively new marvel in the 1950s, required only milk and a quick whisk to thicken into a smooth custard. Housewives poured the mixture into paper cups or small glasses, sometimes topping each with a dollop of whipped cream or a few crushed cookies for extra flair. Because the cups could be made hours in advance or just before the meal, they offered flexibility for busy evenings or last-minute guests. The rich butterscotch flavor felt indulgent yet familiar, appealing to both children and adults who associated it with candy shop treats. This recipe became a staple for families who wanted a sweet ending without heating the oven or dirtying extra pans. Served cold straight from the icebox, the pudding cups represented the modern convenience and playful indulgence that defined many mid-century kitchens. Spam and pickle pinwheels turned an everyday pantry meat into a cheerful party snack that disappeared almost as quickly as it was made. Minced spam was mixed with chopped sweet pickles and a touch of mayonnaise, then spread thinly over slices of soft white bread. Each slice was rolled up tightly and cut into bite-sized spirals that showed off a colorful swirl when arranged on a plate. Hostesses loved that these pinwheels could be prepared in advance and required no stove or oven, making them perfect for summer afternoons or unexpected visitors. The salty richness of the meat, balanced by the tang of the pickle, gave each bite a lively flavor that children and adults both enjoyed. Because the recipe used inexpensive shelf-stable ingredients, it fit neatly into the frugal yet celebratory spirit of the decade. In just a few minutes, a plain loaf of bread and a can of meat became a platter of pretty, savory bites, ready for any occasion from a backyard gathering to a bridge club meeting. Quick cornflake candy clusters showcased the creative use of breakfast cereal in 1950s sweets, offering a treat that could be made in one pan and cooled in minutes. Housewives melted corn syrup and peanut butter together until smooth, then gently folded in crunchy cornflakes to coat each flake with the warm mixture. Spoonfuls were dropped onto waxed paper, where they set into crisp, chewy clusters that children could grab as soon as they cooled. This no-bake dessert became a favorite for school events, church socials, and rainy day kitchen projects with children. The peanut butter provided protein and a rich flavor, while the corn syrup bound everything together without the need for an oven. Because it required no precise measuring or fancy equipment, it was nearly foolproof, a quality every busy homemaker appreciated. The sweet aroma filled the kitchen quickly, making it almost impossible to wait for the clusters to harden completely before tasting. In less than 10 minutes, a box of cereal transformed into a memorable candy that defined simple home indulgence. Egg salad stuffed tomatoes brought garden freshness to the table with a clever presentation that looked elegant without extra work. Hard-boiled eggs were quickly chopped and mixed with mayonnaise, mustard, and a pinch of salt to create a creamy salad. Plump tomatoes were cored and hollowed to form natural cups that cradled the filling, turning an everyday mixture into a dish fit for a luncheon or afternoon tea. Because both eggs and tomatoes were inexpensive and widely available, this recipe became a staple for families seeking a light but satisfying meal. Housewives appreciated how the cool salad contrasted with the juicy tomato walls, creating a refreshing bite ideal for warm evenings when turning on the stove was unwelcome. Guests admired the colorful presentation, and children often enjoyed eating the tomato shells like bowls. With only a few minutes of effort, this simple combination turned common staples into a dish that looked far more elaborate than its humble ingredients suggested. Peanut butter banana milkshake gave families a frosty treat that doubled as a quick source of energy on busy days. Ripe bananas were blended with creamy peanut butter, cold milk, and a spoon of malted milk powder until thick and smooth. Housewives loved that it used fruit that might otherwise go to waste while delivering a protein-rich drink that satisfied hungry children returning from school. The natural sweetness of the bananas meant no extra sugar was necessary, and the malted powder added a nostalgic soda fountain flavor without the need to leave home. Because it required only a blender and a few pantry staples, the shake was ready before the ice cream man reached the end of the street. Parents enjoyed it as a light breakfast on hot mornings, while children begged for it as an after-dinner dessert. In less than 10 minutes, this recipe transformed simple ingredients into a creamy indulgence that felt both wholesome and festive, a perfect reflection of the inventive spirit of 1950s home kitchens. Minute steak sandwiches gave busy 1950s homemakers a hearty meal that could be cooked and assembled in less than 10 minutes while still feeling like a treat worthy of a sit-down dinner. Thin slices of beef, known as minute steaks, were quickly seasoned with salt and pepper before being seared in a hot skillet until browned on each side. The speed of the cooking kept the meat tender and juicy while producing a rich aroma that filled the kitchen almost instantly. Buttered sandwich rolls were warmed at the edge of the pan so they absorbed the flavorful drippings, turning a simple cut of beef into something special. Many women used this recipe to satisfy hungry families on evenings when errands or social obligations cut into cooking time. Children loved the combination of soft bread and flavorful beef, and adults appreciated that the meal felt like a restaurant-style sandwich without the expense or travel. It became a weeknight classic that fit the post-war American love for quick yet substantial dinners that showcased convenience without sacrificing taste or family togetherness. Pimento cheese celery boats offered a bright and crunchy appetizer that required almost no effort, yet brought cheerful color to any mid-century table. Housewives mixed shredded sharp cheddar cheese with diced pimientos and mayonnaise until a smooth spread formed, adjusting the seasoning with a pinch of salt and a dash of mild paprika. Sturdy celery ribs were cut into neat lengths and filled with the mixture, creating a crisp base that contrasted with the creamy filling. The red flecks of pimiento against the pale cheese and green celery made each piece look like a small celebration, ideal for bridge club gatherings or last-minute company. Because every ingredient could be stored in the refrigerator or pantry, this dish became a reliable standby for evenings when unexpected guests arrived. Children enjoyed the crunch and mild flavor while adults appreciated the nostalgic taste that reminded them of Southern luncheons. This quick recipe captured the 1950s fascination with colorful presentation and easy preparation, turning a handful of ordinary ingredients into something party-ready in minutes without heating the oven. One-pan skillet cornbread shortcakes demonstrated how a basic Southern staple could be adapted into a speedy treat that satisfied a sweet craving without demanding a hot oven. Housewives stirred cornmeal, a little sugar, baking powder, milk, and an egg into a simple batter that could be poured into buttered muffin rings, set directly on a preheated skillet. The batter puffed and browned within minutes, creating tender cakes with crisp edges and a warm, nutty aroma. Served hot with a pat of butter or a drizzle of honey, they worked equally well for breakfast, an afternoon snack, or a quick dessert after supper. Their portability also made them perfect for children's lunches or a fast addition to a picnic basket. Because the recipe required only one pan and a few common ingredients, cleanup was minimal, a detail every busy homemaker valued. These shortcakes captured the blend of tradition and efficiency that defined mid-century kitchens, offering a taste of Southern comfort in a time frame that suited the modern post-war household. Maple glazed breakfast apples provided a warm and fragrant side dish that brightened any morning without keeping the cook tied to the stove. Thick slices of tart apples were sautéed in butter until lightly caramelized, then drizzled with real maple syrup and a splash of lemon juice for balance. The fruit softened quickly, releasing a sweet aroma that mingled with the richness of the butter and the earthy scent of maple. Housewives often served these apples alongside pancakes, waffles, or simple scrambled eggs, adding a note of indulgence to an ordinary weekday. Children loved spooning the glossy slices over hot cereal, while adults enjoyed them as a topping for toast or even as a light dessert after dinner. Because the recipe called for only a skillet and a few pantry staples, it could be made on a whim whenever fresh apples were on hand. This quick dish reflected the 1950s enthusiasm for wholesome flavors combined with modern speed, giving every breakfast table a cozy yet efficient touch. Canned salmon patties turned a simple pantry staple into a golden brown main course that could be on the table in minutes, making it a reliable choice for housewives balancing busy schedules and tight budgets. Drained canned salmon was mixed with breadcrumbs, beaten egg, and a hint of onion or parsley before being shaped into small patties. These were quickly fried in a shallow layer of oil until crisp on the outside and tender inside. The mild fish flavor paired beautifully with a squeeze of lemon or a dollop of homemade tartar sauce, offering a taste of the sea without the cost of fresh seafood. Families appreciated that the recipe provided protein-rich nourishment while keeping grocery bills manageable. Because the ingredients were shelf-stable, it was easy to prepare even when the refrigerator was nearly empty. Many children remembered the satisfying crunch and warm, savory interior long after the last bite was gone, making this a beloved standby of the mid-century kitchen and a perfect example of fast, practical cooking. Cheese and olive toothpick bites added a touch of mid-century cocktail hour glamour to even the most casual get-together, proving that entertaining could be both quick and stylish. Small cubes of sharp cheddar or mild American cheese were skewered with firm green olives on wooden toothpicks, sometimes accented with a sliver of pimento for extra color. The salty olives complemented the creamy richness of the cheese, creating a flavor combination that felt more sophisticated than the minimal effort required. Hostesses arranged the bites in concentric circles on gleaming platters, a presentation that looked impressive but took only minutes to assemble. Because the ingredients kept well in the refrigerator, they could be made at a moment's notice when neighbors dropped by or friends stayed after work. Guests appreciated the neat one-bite size that paired perfectly with both cocktails and coffee, and children enjoyed sneaking a few when adults were not looking. These little skewers embodied the era's belief that elegance and efficiency could happily share the same plate. Chocolate marshmallow fudge, squares satisfied sweet cravings with a melt-in-the-mouth richness that required only a stovetop and a brief chill, a true miracle for a generation discovering the joys of quick desserts. Housewives melted chocolate chips with a splash of evaporated milk and a bit of butter, then folded in miniature marshmallows until they softened slightly without losing their shape. The warm mixture was poured into a buttered pan and set in the refrigerator where it firmed within minutes. The result was a smooth, chewy fudge dotted with soft marshmallow pockets that delighted both children and adults. Because the recipe required no careful temperature monitoring or candy thermometer, it was nearly foolproof and ideal for spontaneous treats or last-minute gifts. Neighbors often received small plates wrapped in wax paper as a gesture of friendship, and children carried squares in their lunchboxes as a special surprise. This quick confection captured the 1950s embrace of convenience foods while delivering old-fashioned homemade flavor in record time. Celery cream soup. Shortcut gave homemakers a comforting bowl of soup with almost no effort, turning pantry staples into a warm meal suitable for lunch or a light supper. A can of condensed cream of celery soup was combined with an equal measure of milk and whisked over gentle heat until smooth and steaming. A small knob of butter and a dash of white pepper added richness without extending the cooking time. Housewives often served the soup with crackers or a slice of toasted bread, creating a balanced dish that felt nurturing on chilly evenings. Because it relied on ingredients that were easy to keep on hand, it became a dependable choice when groceries were low or unexpected guests appeared. The soft green hue and delicate aroma brought a hint of freshness to the table, even in winter months when produce was scarce. In just a few minutes, a humble can and a splash of milk transformed into a meal that soothed families and showcased the quiet ingenuity of the mid-century kitchen. Buttered radish toast presented a simple yet surprisingly refined snack that highlighted the crisp bite of fresh radishes against the richness of warm bread and creamy butter. Housewives sliced firm radishes paper-thin and arranged them in overlapping circles on thick slices of freshly toasted bread generously spread with soft butter. A light sprinkle of salt drew out the radish's peppery flavor and added a satisfying crunch. The combination offered a refreshing change from heavier midday fare, making it a popular choice for quick lunches or afternoon teas. Because radishes were inexpensive and easy to grow in backyard gardens, many families enjoyed this treat straight from their own harvest. The vivid contrast of white bread, red radish edges, and pale butter created a visual appeal that felt elegant without extra cost or effort. Served alongside a cup of tea or a small bowl of soup, it became a charming reminder that the simplest ingredients could create memorable flavors when treated with care and attention. Apple butter and cream cheese tea sandwiches brought a gentle sweetness to afternoon gatherings while requiring only moments to prepare. Thin slices of soft bread were spread with smooth cream cheese and a generous layer of spiced apple butter, then pressed together and cut into neat triangles. The creamy tang of the cheese balanced the warm spices and fruit of the apple butter, creating a flavor that felt both comforting and slightly indulgent. Hostesses appreciated that the sandwiches could be assembled in advance and held their shape well on a tiered tray, making them ideal for tea parties or small social visits. Children enjoyed the mild sweetness, while adults found them a pleasing complement to hot tea or coffee. Because both main ingredients kept well in the refrigerator, they were a reliable option when unexpected company arrived or a quick snack was needed. These delicate sandwiches reflected the 1950s love of easy elegance and demonstrated how a few well-chosen pantry staples could create something charming and memorable. Hot dog and relish skillet hash gave busy homemakers a hearty meal that could be prepared with nothing more than a single pan and a few simple ingredients already waiting in the refrigerator. Diced hot dogs were browned alongside small cubes of potato until the edges turned crisp and golden, releasing a savory aroma that quickly filled the kitchen. A spoonful of sweet pickle relish stirred in at the end added a tangy contrast and a burst of color that made the dish as cheerful as it was satisfying. Many families enjoyed this as a quick dinner after a long day because it required no special cuts of meat and stretched a modest grocery budget. Children loved the familiar flavor of hot dogs, while parents appreciated the ease of cleanup and the comforting combination of salty and sweet. The recipe fit perfectly into the fast-paced 1950s lifestyle, proving that a warm and filling supper did not need hours of preparation. In less than 10 minutes, it turned humble ingredients into a dish worthy of a place at any family table. Instant tapioca custard cups captured the thrill of modern convenience with a dessert that seemed elegant despite being ready in minutes. Pearl tapioca simmered gently in sweetened milk until translucent and thick, creating a base that was smooth yet delightfully textured. Beaten egg yolks were whisked in near the end for a gentle richness, while a splash of vanilla provided a warm aroma that drifted through the kitchen. Housewives spooned the custard into small cups and set them in the refrigerator, where they cooled quickly enough to serve after supper without hours of waiting. The tiny pearls offered a playful pop that fascinated children, while adults savored the silky creaminess. Because the ingredients were inexpensive and kept well in the pantry, it became a reliable last-minute dessert for unexpected guests or sudden cravings. Served plain or with a sprinkling of grated nutmeg, it brought a touch of old-fashioned charm to the modern mid-century table and showcased how quick cooking products could create something memorable and delicious. Marshmallow orange salad offered a bright splash of color and a sweet tang that brightened potlucks and Sunday dinners alike. Housewives combined canned mandarin segments with mini marshmallows, sweetened coconut, and a generous fold of freshly whipped topping to bind everything together in a light, fluffy cloud. The citrus juice lightly softened the marshmallows while keeping the overall texture airy and refreshing. This salad needed only a quick toss in a large bowl and a brief chill, making it an easy contribution to church socials or family gatherings where time was short and presentation mattered. The cheerful orange and white mixture looked festive in a cut glass dish and tasted like sunshine even during cold months when fresh fruit was scarce. Children loved sneaking spoonfuls straight from the refrigerator, while adults appreciated a dessert that felt both indulgent and effortless. With every bite, the combination of creamy sweetness and bright citrus embodied the playful optimism of the 1950s, and the era's belief that convenience could still bring a touch of magic to the table. Bacon and cheese waffle, which combined the novelty of frozen waffles with the timeless appeal of crisp bacon and melted cheese, creating a breakfast or lunch that felt both fun and filling. Pre-made waffles were quickly toasted until golden, then layered with strips of freshly cooked bacon and slices of mild cheddar before being pressed together like a sandwich. A short stint back on the hot waffle iron fused the layers into a warm, gooey package that could be eaten by hand. Housewives loved how the recipe transformed common breakfast items into something hearty enough for a midday meal, while requiring almost no cleanup. Children were thrilled by the playful idea of waffles outside of morning hours and the way the cheese stretched with every bite. The mix of sweet waffle edges and smoky bacon satisfied a wide range of tastes and showed how modern freezer products could simplify meal planning. This quick creation perfectly captured the inventive spirit of mid-century kitchens where efficiency and comfort happily met. Tomato aspic salad squares brought a savory twist to the mid-century love affair with gelatin, turning a simple tomato base into a striking dish for buffet tables. Housewives dissolved unflavored gelatin in seasoned tomato juice, adding a splash of lemon juice and a pinch of celery salt for brightness. Once set in a shallow pan, the firm red sheet was cut into tidy cubes or squares and arranged on lettuce leaves for serving. The cool, slightly tart bites provided a refreshing contrast to rich meats and creamy side dishes often found at potlucks or holiday spreads. Because the aspic could be made well in advance and required no last-minute attention, it became a dependable choice for hostesses who wanted both beauty and practicality. Guests admired the jewel-like appearance and the unexpected savory flavor that lingered lightly on the tongue. This recipe reflected the era's fascination with molded salads and the desire to transform everyday ingredients into something elegant with little effort or expense. Coffee gelatin cream turned a humble cup of coffee into a chilled dessert that felt surprisingly sophisticated and indulgent. Strongly brewed coffee was sweetened and mixed with plain gelatin, then poured into molds to set until firm. Just before serving, each portion was topped with a generous spoon of lightly whipped cream that softened against the cool surface. The result was a bittersweet treat that appealed to adults who wanted something less sugary than typical puddings, yet still refreshing on warm evenings. Housewives appreciated that it could be prepared hours ahead of time, freeing them to focus on other tasks or enjoy company without last-minute fuss. The dark amber color and delicate wobble gave it an elegant presence on the table despite its simple preparation. Sipped alongside a small cookie or slice of pound cake, it showcased the 1950s taste for modern coffee-flavored desserts and proved that a pantry staple could easily become an impressive finish to a meal. Pineapple cottage cheese rings provided a quick balance of sweet and creamy flavors that fit perfectly into the health-conscious trends emerging in the post-war years. Thick slices of canned pineapple were drained and arranged on small plates, each ring crowned with a scoop of chilled cottage cheese. A sprinkle of paprika or finely chopped chives added a gentle kick and a pop of color that pleased the eye as much as the palate. The combination offered protein, fruit, and a touch of freshness with almost no preparation, making it a favorite for light lunches or afternoon snacks. Housewives served these rings when friends stopped by for coffee or as a cooling side dish during hot summer evenings. Children enjoyed the playful shape and the contrast between juicy pineapple and creamy cheese. This simple recipe embodied the 1950s belief that wholesome could also be beautiful and demonstrated how a few pantry staples could create a dish that felt both modern and delightfully satisfying. Quick oatmeal. Drop cookies gave families a warm, homemade treat without the long wait or complicated steps of traditional baking. Rolled oats were stirred with brown sugar, softened shortening, and a splash of milk until a sticky dough formed that could be dropped by spoonfuls onto a baking sheet. Because the cookies baked in just a few minutes, the kitchen quickly filled with the comforting aroma of toasted oats and caramelized sugar. Housewives relied on this recipe when children returned from school hungry, or when unexpected guests arrived and a sweet bite was needed fast. The chewy texture and simple flavor appealed to everyone, and the recipe was easy enough that older children could help with mixing and scooping. Served with a glass of cold milk, these cookies brought an old-fashioned warmth to even the busiest day. Their speed and reliability made them a beloved staple in countless mid-century households where homemade goodness was always within reach. Shrimp cocktail cups offered a dash of coastal elegance that could be assembled in moments using pantry and freezer staples. Canned shrimp or thawed frozen shrimp were quickly tossed in a tangy sauce of ketchup, prepared horseradish, and a squeeze of lemon juice. The mixture was spooned into small paper baking cups or tiny glass dishes and chilled briefly before serving. Guests enjoyed the bright, briny flavor and the neat individual portions that made parties feel more sophisticated without adding to the hostess's workload. Housewives appreciated how this dish turned inexpensive canned seafood into something festive and memorable with almost no effort. The cool, refreshing bite made it a popular choice for summer gatherings and cocktail hours when heavy dishes felt out of place. This quick appetizer reflected the 1950s enthusiasm for modern entertaining and the growing availability of seafood in everyday markets, proving that elegance could be achieved on a tight schedule and a modest budget. Malted chocolate egg cream brought the magic of a soda fountain into the home kitchen with a drink that felt indulgent yet needed only minutes to prepare. Chocolate syrup and malted milk powder were whisked with a splash of cold milk until smooth, then topped with a vigorous pour of chilled seltzer that created a frothy head. Despite the name, no egg was used, just the airy foam that gave it a playful charm. Children marveled at the bubbles while adults enjoyed a nostalgic taste of their own youthful trips to corner drugstore counters. Housewives loved how easily the ingredients could be kept on hand and how quickly the drink came together when a sweet craving struck. Served in tall glasses with paper straws, it turned an ordinary afternoon into a celebration and reminded everyone of carefree days. This quick fountain-style treat captured the hopeful, fun-loving spirit of the 1950s and showed how simple pantry items could deliver a true taste of happiness. Fish stick. Po' boy brought a taste of the Gulf Coast to busy kitchens using only what sat in the freezer. Packaged fish sticks baked or pan-fried until their coating turned golden and crunchy, while soft sandwich rolls warmed in the oven. Tartar sauce was stirred together with chopped pickles, a squeeze of lemon, and a little mustard, filling the kitchen with a tangy scent. Shredded lettuce and thin tomato slices waited on the counter, ready to add freshness and color. As soon as the fish sticks finished, they were stacked inside the rolls, drizzled with the cool sauce and topped with the crisp vegetables. The contrast of hot, flaky fish and chilled toppings tasted like a seaside lunch, even on a weeknight far from the water. In less than 15 minutes, a handful of inexpensive ingredients became a meal that felt special, making families forget how quickly it came together. Every crunchy bite delivered the carefree feeling of a coastal vacation without leaving the house, a reminder that a freezer staple can still capture the spirit of a faraway kitchen when imagination and hunger meet. Applesauce toast with nutmeg was the frugal breakfast tucked inside every homemaker column and Depression-era guide when groceries ran low but mornings kept coming. You would toast a slice of bread, smear it with applesauce, sprinkle a little nutmeg on top, and breakfast was done in under 10 minutes. It was practical, filling, and sweet enough to feel comforting when everything else felt stretched thin. Families leaned on meals like this when fruit was scarce, budgets were tight, and creativity had to carry the kitchen. Applesauce lasted longer than fresh fruit, nutmeg added warmth, and toast turned it all into a quick meal that actually filled you up. It was not fancy, but it worked, and you could find it everywhere from farm kitchens to city apartments. Some folks added butter, others kept it plain, but either way, it was one of those quiet little breakfasts that made hard mornings feel a little easier. These days, applesauce toast barely gets a mention, but back then it quietly carried families through. Quick tomato egg drop soup was a fast, practical dinner that showed up in old cookbooks for families juggling tight grocery budgets and tighter schedules. You started with hot broth, usually whatever bouillon cube or soup base you had in the cupboard. Then you poured in canned tomatoes and stirred everything together until it simmered. The final touch was whisked eggs, slowly dripped in as you stirred, turning into silky ribbons in the hot broth. It looked a little fancier than it was, but this meal was all about speed and making the best of what you had. The tomatoes added sweetness, the broth made it filling, and the eggs gave enough protein to keep everyone going. It came together in less than 10 minutes and cost next to nothing, which is exactly why old cookbooks loved it. It was warm, fast, and comforting without much effort. Families leaned on meals like this because they filled bellies and stretched paychecks at the same time. Funny how those quick little soup tricks turned into classics that still stick with people. Long before fancy nut butters dominated grocery aisles, a beloved combination of peanut butter and bananas reigned supreme in many American homes. Referred to fondly by some as the old-time peanut butter and banana sandwich, it gained traction in the mid-20th century as an affordable yet satisfying pick-me-up. Historians note that peanut butter became widely popularized in the United States in the early 1900s, while bananas, thanks to expanding imports, evolved into a household staple. This distinctive pairing offers both creamy consistency and a soft, subtly sweet bite that fuses into a delightfully nostalgic treat, promising convenience for busy families needing a quick snack. Some enthusiasts joke that the only challenging part is deciding whether to toast the bread, but the crucial element is the dreamy melding of textures. Accessibility, highlighted by easily sourced ingredients, underscores why the sandwich remains iconic despite changing food trends. It also provides a modest dose of potassium from bananas and protein from peanut butter, underscoring its practicality. Jelly roll-ups on white bread were a quick, sweet little snack that kept plenty of kids going when there was not much else to pack in their lunchbox. You took a slice of sandwich bread, rolled it flat with a rolling pin or a glass, spread on jelly, and rolled it up tight. That was all there was to it. It sounds simple now, but back then, this was the kind of treat that showed up when families had to stretch every dollar. It was fast, easy, and made use of pantry staples that were always on hand. You would find these roll-ups tucked into school lunches, brought to church picnics, or passed around as after-school snacks when groceries were running low. The jelly added sweetness, the bread kept it filling, and it all came together in just a few minutes. It might be forgotten today, but for plenty of families, these jelly roll-ups were a quick fix that kept kids happy and parents sane. Rice and egg bowls with soy sauce were the thrift store cookbook lunch that turned leftovers into something hot, salty, and satisfying in minutes. You grabbed leftover rice, tossed it in a pan, cracked in an egg, scrambled everything together, and finished with a dash of soy sauce. It was quick, filling, and one of the smartest ways to stretch pantry basics into lunch. Old, thrifty meal guides loved this recipe because it used stuff already sitting in your fridge and came together in under 10 minutes. Some folks added chopped scallions or a little sesame oil, but the classic stayed simple: rice, egg, and soy sauce, fried up fast. It was a go-to for busy parents, college students, or anyone making do with leftovers and a tight grocery budget. The rice got crispy around the edges, the egg brought protein, and the soy sauce pulled it all together. It might not win awards for presentation, but it filled you up and tasted good when you needed a cheap, fast lunch. Country ham and red-eye gravy brought a bold, salty kick to the end of a long day, drawing on traditions that went back generations. Thin slices of country ham hit a hot skillet and sizzled until their edges crisped and their smoky scent filled the kitchen. Once the meat was removed, strong black coffee was poured into the pan to deglaze the savory bits, blending with a splash of water and a touch of butter to create the dark, rich gravy that gave the dish its name. The result was a sauce both bitter and savory, perfect for spooning over the ham or soaking into warm biscuits. In less than 15 minutes, the table held a meal that tasted slow, cooked, and soulful. Working families appreciated the speed while still honoring a Southern classic, and the sharp aroma of coffee and ham became a sign that dinner was ready. Each bite balanced salt, smoke, and a subtle bitterness, a reminder of farmhouse suppers where nothing was wasted and flavor came from skill and tradition rather than expensive ingredients. Buttered cornflake toast was one of those forgotten 10-minute breakfasts that once lived in every kid's cookbook or church bulletin. You would toast a slice of soft white bread, slather it with butter or peanut butter if you had it, then smash some cornflakes on top. That was it. Crunchy, sweet, filling, and ready before the school bus pulled up. It was not some gourmet recipe, just a quick fix that felt special on rushed mornings. Most families kept cereal on hand anyway, and this was a way to stretch it when the grocery budget was tight. Sometimes parents sprinkled sugar on top, other times it was plain, but either way it turned leftover cereal into breakfast that actually stuck with you. You could even swap peanut butter for jam or just plain butter, depending on what was left in the fridge. These kinds of quick breakfasts were everywhere in old cookbooks. Simple, made from pantry staples, and good enough to get everyone out the door without complaints. Sardines on rye with onion and mustard was the kind of dinner that proved you could survive on pantry food and still eat something with bite. You opened a can of sardines, layered them cold onto slices of rye bread, and topped the whole thing with sliced onion and spicy mustard. That was dinner. It was salty, briny, sharp, and came together in minutes without a stove or oven in sight. This meal showed up in old cookbooks and handwritten recipe cards for one reason: it worked. Sardines were cheap, packed with protein, and lasted forever in the cupboard. Rye bread had enough bite to hold its own, and the mustard gave everything a sharp kick that kept it from feeling too plain. You ate it open-faced, with a fork and knife if you felt proper, or just with your hands when time was short. It was quick, practical, and oddly satisfying, even when the grocery budget was running on empty. Funny how the simplest pantry meals stuck with us, long after times got easier. Sardine and onion sandwiches were one of those quick, no-frills meals that filled hungry workers up fast and showed up in plenty of lunch pails across America. You opened a tin of sardines, laid them on rye bread, added some raw onion slices, and that was it. Simple, salty, and ready in under 10 minutes. It might sound harsh now, but back when protein was hard to come by and groceries were scarce, this was a go-to meal. The sardines gave you the protein, the onions added bite, and the rye bread kept you full. You would find this sandwich scribbled into old cookbooks, passed around among factory workers, or tucked into lunch boxes for folks heading out the door. It was never fancy, but it worked. Today, most people have forgotten how handy meals like this were, but back then, sardine and onion sandwiches helped plenty of families stretch what little they had and stay full through long, hard days. Jellied chicken salad cups were the quirky retro lunch you probably saw at your grandmother's house or flipped past in old homemaker guides. You made chicken salad, shredded chicken, mayo, celery, a little seasoning, and then set the whole thing in gelatin until it firmed up. It sounds strange now, but back then, this was peak luncheon presentation. You scooped the wobbly salad into lettuce leaves, added a sprig of parsley or a cherry tomato, and served it cold. It was light, chilled, and looked fancier than the ingredients actually were. These showed up at potlucks, garden parties, and quick family lunches when the oven stayed off and time was short. Gelatin molds made everything feel more polished, even when it came straight from leftovers and pantry basics. Old cookbooks loved recipes like this because they stretched food, required no cooking, and made lunch look impressive with barely any effort. It might feel out of place today, but jellied chicken salad cups were fast, filling, and weirdly fun when they first hit the table. Beef and onion sandwich spread proved that deli leftovers could turn into a hearty supper in almost no time. Thin slices of roast beef, whether from a weekend dinner or the grocery counter, were chopped fine and folded into a bowl of mayonnaise and diced onions. A splash of Worcestershire sauce and a pinch of black pepper added depth, while the onions provided crunch and a sharp bite. The mixture chilled for just a few minutes while bread toasted and plates were set. Then it was piled thick between slices of rye or soft white sandwich bread. Some families liked a layer of crisp lettuce for freshness, while others spooned the spread onto crackers for an easy snack that still felt like a meal. It stretched a small amount of beef into several servings, saving both time and money while still tasting indulgent. Each bite combined creamy texture with savory meat and a gentle onion heat, the kind of simple pleasure that keeps everyone coming back for seconds. Quick to make, rich to eat, this spread turned odds and ends into a dinner worth remembering, proving that thrift and flavor can happily share the same table. Leftover biscuit with syrup or gravy drizzle was one of those Depression-era breakfasts that made sure nothing ever went to waste. You would take yesterday's biscuit, stale or not, reheat it, and pour canned gravy or a drizzle of syrup over the top. Suddenly, leftovers became breakfast in under 10 minutes. Families leaned on meals like this when the cupboards were bare and payday felt a long way off. It was not fancy, but it filled your belly and kept mornings moving. Syrup sweetened things up, gravy made it savory, and both stretched the little bit of food you had into something satisfying. Farmhouses, boarding houses, even factory kitchens knew this trick by heart. You could find it tucked away in old homemaker guides and church recipe swaps, quietly keeping people fed when groceries were scarce. Some meals disappeared quietly, but back then, this one carried families through lean times with nothing but yesterday's bread and a little creativity. But you still wanted dinner to taste halfway decent. It came together in 10 minutes flat. You drained a can of sweet corn, tossed it in a skillet with butter, and let it sizzle until the kernels softened and browned just a little around the edges. Then you cracked in a few eggs, scrambled them together, and dinner was done before anyone could ask what was cooking. Old cookbooks loved recipes like this because they were fast, cheap, and practical. You could eat it plain or sprinkle on some salt and pepper to dress it up. The sweetness of the corn with the soft, buttery eggs made a surprisingly good combination. It was filling enough to pass for dinner, but easy enough to feel like you barely lifted a finger. These were the meals that stretched the grocery budget, kept families full, and made sure nobody went to bed hungry. It might not have been fancy, but back then, fancy was never the goal. Getting by was. Hot dog and baked bean skillet was one of those quirky 10-minute meals that could only have come from Grandma's old cookbook. You sliced up hot dogs, tossed them in a skillet, and poured in a can of baked beans. That was it. Dinner done. It sounds ridiculous now, but back when money was tight and every meal counted, this was comfort food at its quickest. The beans were filling, the hot dogs gave you just enough protein, and you could stretch one can to feed the whole family. Some folks got fancy with mustard or onions, but most kept it plain. It was the kind of dish that showed up after a long workday, when you were too tired to fuss with complicated recipes but still needed to put something on the table. It bubbled away on the stove, filling the kitchen with that warm, smoky smell that meant dinner was ready. Today, it feels like one of those meals we forgot on purpose, but for families back then, it was a lifesaver that showed up fast and kept bellies full. Cold chicken and mayonnaise roll-ups were the leftover lunch you barely had to think about, but still managed to feel like a proper meal. You shredded leftover chicken, stirred in mayo, maybe a little salt or pepper, and spread it onto soft white bread slices. Then you rolled them up tight, sliced them into little spirals if you wanted to be fancy, and lunch was ready in minutes. Some folks added celery sticks or pickles on the side, but most kept it plain, just cold chicken, bread, and mayo doing the heavy lifting. This quick lunch showed up everywhere from family picnics to old-school lunchboxes because it made use of leftovers, took no time, and filled you up fast. It may not have been flashy, but for busy days and bare cupboards, these little roll-ups worked better than most would guess. Egg and potato. Hash turned scraps into a filling supper that could be on the table before the day's stories were finished. Leftover boiled potatoes were diced and tossed into a hot skillet with a bit of butter until their edges crisped to a golden brown. Eggs were cracked directly over the sizzling potatoes, their yolks breaking to coat each bite in a rich sauce as they cooked. A sprinkle of salt, pepper, and maybe a dash of paprika was all it needed. The aroma of frying potatoes and eggs promised satisfaction and thrift, a meal built from yesterday's extras and today's needs. Served straight from the pan, the hash invited everyone to eat family style, forks clinking as the steam rose. It proved that speed never had to sacrifice comfort and that the best dinners often came from making the most of what was already on hand. Raisin bran with warm milk and butter was the winter breakfast trick every frugal family knew when mornings were freezing, but there was still work to be done. You would pour bran flakes into a bowl, warm some milk on the stove, add a small scoop of butter, and pour it all over the cereal. Breakfast done in 10 minutes, flat, warm, creamy, and filling enough to carry you through the morning. Families leaned on meals like this when groceries ran tight, but everyone still needed something hot and practical to start the day. It was sweet from the raisins, buttery from the milk, and surprisingly comforting for something so simple. You could find versions of this breakfast in old community cookbooks, homemaker guides, and those faded recipe cards tucked in kitchen drawers. Some folks sprinkled sugar, others added cinnamon, but it always came back to the same quiet goal: stretch a little food as far as you could and start the day with something warm. Funny how those simple breakfasts disappear when new trends roll in. Vienna sausage omelet rolls were the quick, clever way families turned pantry food into dinner when the fridge looked bare. You sliced up those little Vienna sausages, tossed them into a hot skillet, and poured whisked eggs right over the top. As the eggs set, you rolled them up like a little omelet wrap, cut it in half if you wanted, and dinner was ready before anyone had time to ask what was cooking. Old cookbooks were filled with recipes like this, fast meals that used up canned staples and turned them into something hot, salty, and filling. You could spoon a little relish on top, serve it with crackers, or keep it plain, but no matter how you fixed it, it hit the spot. Vienna sausages were cheap, easy to store, and lasted forever in the pantry, which made them a go-to when fresh meat was hard to come by. These omelet rolls were not fancy, but they filled you up and got dinner done without much effort. Meals like this stuck around because they worked. They made the most of what little you had, and sometimes that was more than enough. Peanut butter and sweet pickle sandwiches were one of those strange combinations that somehow became a regular part of vintage kitchen routines. You spread creamy peanut butter on soft sandwich bread, added sliced sweet pickles, and pressed it together. That was it. Quick, crunchy, and a little tangy with just enough sweetness to balance it out. It sounds odd now, but back then it was a favorite for busy lunches, quick after-school snacks, or when there was not much else in the pantry. The peanut butter gave it richness, the pickles added bite, and together they made a sandwich that stuck to your ribs and kept you going. You would find this one scribbled in old recipe boxes passed around at church picnics or quietly tucked into Grandma's cookbook among the other quirky 10-minute meals. Families leaned on this recipe because it came together fast, filled you up, and used ingredients most people always had on hand. It might be forgotten now, but for plenty of households back then, peanut butter and sweet pickle sandwiches were a surprising lifesaver when time and money were both running short. Leftover meatloaf sandwiches with ketchup were the reliable lunches that showed up in fridges across America the day after dinner. You sliced cold meatloaf thin, layered it onto soft sandwich bread, added a squirt of ketchup, and called it done. It was fast, filling, and made sure that last night's dinner stretched just a little further. Meatloaf itself was all about using affordable ingredients, ground beef, breadcrumbs, eggs, and stretching them into a meal for the whole family. Turning leftovers into sandwiches was the next logical step, and it worked. You got a hearty, savory lunch ready in under 10 minutes with barely any effort. Old cookbooks loved suggesting it. Lunchboxes were packed with it, and kids grew up knowing exactly what was coming after meatloaf night. You could add cheese or lettuce if you had them, but most families kept it plain with just meatloaf and ketchup. It might not sound glamorous now, but back then it was the fast, frugal lunch that kept families fed and made every bit of dinner count. Skillet hot dogs with onions and peppers brought the flavor of a street cart into the kitchen without the need for a grill. Hot dogs were scored and browned in a cast-iron pan, while sliced onions and bell peppers sautéed beside them in a little butter and salt. The vegetables softened and caramelized, releasing a sweetness that mingled with the smoky scent of the searing meat. Split rolls were toasted directly in the same pan to catch every bit of flavor. In less than 10 minutes, the hot dogs were nestled into the warm bread and piled high with the pepper and onion mixture. A quick dinner that felt indulgent and hearty. Families loved the one-pan cleanup and the way the dish fed a group with minimal effort. Each bite carried the taste of summer fairs and city sidewalks, proving that even a humble hot dog can become a meal worth remembering when time is short and hunger is strong. cottage cheese with canned fruit cocktail was the speedy, no-cook breakfast that lived in every 1970s diet book and homemaker guide, promising light meals that took barely any effort. You would scoop cottage cheese onto a plate, pour canned fruit cocktail over the top, and breakfast was done in under 10 minutes. Sweet, creamy, and surprisingly filling, it worked when mornings were busy, but everyone still needed something practical to eat. Families leaned on meals like this when groceries were tight, and dieters swore by it for being low effort and satisfying enough to skip the fancy recipes. It was a trick you could find tucked inside women's magazines, diet plans, and community cookbooks trying to stretch fruit and dairy into a real meal. Some folks added nuts or honey, others kept it plain. But either way, it quietly filled countless tables before frozen meals and boxed breakfasts took over. Funny how those quick, reliable meals slipped away. Potted meat spread on Ritz crackers was one of those pantry dinners that proved fast, salty, and filling could all happen in under 10 minutes. You popped open a can of potted meat, scooped it straight onto Ritz crackers, and that was dinner. It could be served cold, right from the can, or warmed up if you wanted to make it feel a little fancier. But most folks just ate it plain. The creamy, salty spread paired with buttery crackers was oddly comforting, especially on busy nights or after long days when there was no time or energy to cook. Old cookbooks were packed with tricks like this, budget meals that filled you up with nothing but pantry staples and some creativity. Potted meat might not sound glamorous now, but it lasted forever in the cupboard and made dinner happen when groceries ran low. These little cracker meals were fast, filling, and made the best of tight times. Funny how a can of mystery meat and a box of crackers could still count as dinner and leave you full. Mayo and lettuce sandwiches were one of those simple, no-nonsense Depression-era meals that somehow filled you up when there was not much else to work with. You slapped some mayonnaise on soft sandwich bread, added a few crisp iceberg lettuce leaves, and called it lunch. That was it. It might sound plain today, but back when grocery shelves were bare and paychecks were stretched thin, this quick little meal showed up on a lot of kitchen tables. Families made do with what they had, and mayonnaise gave the sandwich some fat and flavor while lettuce added crunch and made it feel fresh. It was cheap, fast, and surprisingly satisfying when times were tough. You would see it scribbled onto old recipe cards or passed down through word of mouth as a quick lunch fix that cost next to nothing. These sandwiches are mostly forgotten now, but back then, they were a lifesaver that came together in under 10 minutes. Cracker Stack lunches were the shortcut every lunchbox kid quietly loved, and every parent threw together when time was short. You took Ritz crackers, layered slices of American cheese between them, and tossed in some apple slices on the side. It was simple, salty, and filled you up without needing to cook a thing. Old lunchbox guides always had this one listed because it hit that sweet spot between easy, affordable, and kid-friendly. Some folks swapped in peanut butter or ham, but the classic cheese and cracker combo stuck around the longest. It was not gourmet, but it got the job done. Quick, portable, and ready before the bus pulled up. It sounds basic now, but for families juggling busy mornings and tight grocery budgets, Cracker Stacks were a reliable lunch that needed zero effort to pull off. Cornbread and pinto beans bowl turned leftover staples into a 10-minute dinner that warmed both stomach and spirit. Cold cornbread from the previous night was crumbled into wide bowls while a pot of pre-cooked pinto beans reheated on the stove with a splash of water and a pinch of chili powder. As the beans bubbled, their smoky scent filled the air, carrying memories of long simmering meals that once took hours. The hot beans were ladled over the cornbread, their broth soaking into every crumb until the bowl became a soft, savory stew. A drizzle of hot sauce or a spoonful of chopped onions added brightness, though many enjoyed it plain, letting the natural flavor of the beans and the sweet cornmeal shine. It was a dish of pure practicality, stretching yesterday's work into today's dinner without a single complaint. Quick to prepare and impossible to tire of, this simple bowl proved that good food is often nothing more than humble ingredients handled with care and eaten with gratitude. Ketchup fried rice was one of those odd shortcut dinners that turned pantry scraps into something hot and surprisingly satisfying. You started with cold leftover rice, tossed it in a hot skillet with chopped onions, and stirred in a few big spoonfuls of ketchup. That was it. If you had leftover meat like ham or chicken, you diced it up and threw it in too. It was tangy, salty, a little sweet, and filled you up fast when there was not much else in the fridge. This recipe showed up in old cookbooks from the 1950s through the 70s, a quirky little trick that stretched leftovers and made dinner happen in 10 minutes flat. It was not fancy, but it worked, especially for families juggling tight paychecks and even tighter grocery lists. You might not see ketchup fried rice on menus today, but back then, it was a practical fix for busy nights and bare pantries. It turned scraps into something warm, filling, and oddly comforting. Funny how the strangest combinations sometimes stick with us the longest. Tell us which Speedy 50s recipe you're daring to try first, drop a comment, hit like for more tasty blasts from the past, and subscribe to keep the retro fun cooking.